Coming on the air with breaking news and a historic moment right here at the White House, where any minute now we expect to see President Trump greet Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy ahead of a high-stakes meeting in the Oval Office. Today's meeting follows Trump's summit with Russian leader Vladimir Putin Friday in Alaska, which Zelenskyy was not invited to. Trump and Putin signaled progress was made towards ending the war in Ukraine, but gave few details about what was discussed. And over the weekend, the president saying Ukraine might have to give up territory to end the war and suggesting he wants to go straight to a permanent peace deal instead of establishing a ceasefire first. And in a show of support for Zelenskyy, today several European leaders are in Washington. You see them right here. They have all entered the White House earlier today to meet with Zelenskyy and also meet with President Trump. And a reminder, it was just 6 months ago when President Zelenskyy was here at the White House that they had that major blow-up right in the Oval Office with President Trump, and that news conference watched around the world that really set the tone for the relationship between the Trump administration and Ukraine that has since evolved once again. Again, President Zelenskyy coming here in hopes of getting a peace deal, but what will that take? The deal's still very unclear. The details scant. I want to bring in our chief White House correspondent, Peter Alexander, who joins me here on the north lawn of the White House. Peter, just behind us, we see the color guard here. We're going to see President Zelenskyy come in his motorcade right here. Walk our viewers through what we can expect.
Well, as you can see behind us now, you have the color guard that will be greeting him. A matter of days ago, it was the military flyover, the red carpet. These are the trappings that traditionally greet a foreign dignitary when they arrive at the West Wing of the Oval Office. Over the course of the last hour or so, Tom, we've watched this parade of presidents and prime ministers, the German chancellor among them here. This is a remarkable show of European force that'll be joining Zelenskyy, not in that initial meeting. That'll be significant. That's when Donald Trump and Zelenskyy will sit down together. And we're probably going to get right out of the gates a pretty good sense of how things are looking as the day begins. You'll remember when Trump greeted Zelenskyy back in February, it was in that initial moment where the president almost said mockingly, dismissively, he got all dressed up for this. A lot of folks said that was sort of a precursor to what we would witness behind closed doors in the Oval Office. And
we're going to be watching to see how President Zelenskyy is dressed today. There's already been some reports that he is not wearing his usual military sort of field gear, if you will, what he usually wears because his country is at war. We'll see how he's dressed here. That meeting 6 months ago, it erupted in front of the world, right, in front of the cameras. The president telling Zelenskyy you don't have the cards to be more grateful. The vice president also weighing in. It was almost sort of a tag team against Zelenskyy, who came here asking for help, hoping to get help.
And I think there's a different question he'll be asking today, which is likely, what is Vladimir Putin willing to give up? Donald Trump has talked about land swaps. The frustration for the Ukrainians, for the Ukrainian president, has been, well, you're asking us, or they're asking us to give up land. They're not giving up anything. So is there any give and take that the president is willing to push on here? You'll remember the president went into that Friday session saying he would be very, in his words, unhappy if he didn't depart with a ceasefire. We're starting to hear the motorcade as it gathers not far from us. He arrived saying he would be unhappy if there wasn't a ceasefire. He left leaning more toward Vladimir Putin's view of things, desiring a peace deal first.
We're seeing the beginning of the motorcade pull into the White House right now. We're going to pause as soon as the car passes by us. Peter, you were just commenting. There are hundreds of reporters here. You've never seen a media presence this large in both terms of President Trump. Is that fair to say?
I've covered the White House for 13 years. I've never seen this many foreign reporters here, but consider there are 7 separate foreign leaders who are here right now. You have delegations from across the planet. You have foreign leaders who had to scramble during what would normally be their August breaks to be able to come here on less than 24 hours notice.
And also the most pressing issue in Europe right now, which is a war in Ukraine that has gone on for nearly 3.5 years. We're talking about more than 1 million casualties on both sides. Hundreds of thousands of Russians have died. 60 to 100,000 Ukrainians have died. And Ukraine, a much smaller country, able to hold off Russia for 3.5 years. Russia pushed to the point where they're now having prisoners fight for them. They're having North Koreans come in, North Korean ammunition and weapons. It's been a complicated and very bloody war. And Secretary of State Marco Rubio really put it best. He says it's become a meat grinder, and Russia has more meat, and that's why they don't want to stop fighting at all.
Yeah, no doubt that's the case. But remember, for the Ukrainian people, this is their land that they say they're fighting for, which is why you've seen so many civilians be called up to join soldiers on the front lines. A lot's going to get at stake, and over the course of this visit, we'll have time to talk about what is critical here. And a lot of the conversation is going to focus on what we refer to as the Donbass, the eastern region. You talk about the Donbass. What does Donbass mean? That is the Donetsk coal region. That is famous for for its minerals, its coal, its ore, its lithium. This is a valuable resource, and notably, it's also sort of the industrial powerhouse and the military powerhouse for the Ukrainian people as well.
You can see the map right here as we show our viewers the red section. That is what Russia controls right now. The initial reports that have come out from Alaska suggest that Vladimir Putin wants even more than this. He wants lands that have not been conquered yet, lands that Ukrainians still hold, and that could be a contentious issue. On top of all of this, Ukraine cannot cede land without a countrywide referendum that is voted on. So it's incredibly complicated. This peace deal, if it is indeed a peace deal, was going to take a lot of time. And then there's the big question about how do they maintain this peace deal? Peacekeeping troops. Russia will never allow NATO troops into Ukraine. That is sort of a red line for them. But the UK and France have offered their own soldiers to be peacekeeping troops if we get to that far. But, Peter, you know, a lot of the reporting, a lot of the suggestions, the speculation, we don't know what President Trump agreed to with Vladimir Putin. We still don't know. We hope to learn more later today.
And we now see some of these service members getting in position as they anticipate.
Yeah, and let's pause for a moment. Let's see if we can see President Zelenskyy come in.
That's him in that vehicle.
Yeah. So President Zelenskyy just coming in right now to the White House. We're going to put some eyes on him right now as he enters. He's going to do a quick photo op, we think, with the president. The president should greet him right outside here.
That's exactly right. He'll greet him right there in front of the West Wing. This is the tradition. So if you take that shot momentarily, you will see him. He will greet him at the door, and then likely they'll address the cameras very briefly, if without words, certainly with a wave. Let's watch.
President Trump there with Volodymyr Zelenskyy. We can see the president warmly welcoming him, putting his arm around him. Reporters obviously shouting questions. The president wasn't ready to answer anything quite yet. We're watching here the body language, Peter, because we want to know how he greets President Zelenskyy. Is it the same way he greeted President Putin in Alaska just a few days ago, which was a very warm welcome? The whole world saw as President Putin walked into the Beast and was smiling and waving to reporters as they drove off to that summit. It looks like it was a warm welcome. It sounds like he may have commented something about the way he was dressed, but we'll find out later. Again, President Zelenskyy back in the White House 6 months later. We know that both these leaders have met, both at the Vatican and I think in Europe as well.
They've met twice since. You're right. And what's striking to me here is the last time Volodymyr Zelenskyy was here, he had that greeting with the president, and then he was escorted out of the White House after that meeting. This time he comes in, again, in effect, embraced by President Trump. But bigger than the body language ultimately will be what happens in those private discussions between these individuals, what Volodymyr Zelenskyy is open to, what he's willing to do. The president has already made clear where his position is on this. He says he wants a peace deal. He thinks it should include some giving away, ceding of Ukrainian land. And does it also include a NATO-like agreement where European countries agree to protect, support Ukraine in some way, but doesn't reach the bar of NATO itself? Is that enough for the Ukrainians?
We should put that graphic we have of all the Western leaders that are here, the European leaders, including the president of France, Emmanuel Macron. You can see Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister. Chancellor Merz is here from Germany as well, along with the NATO Secretary General. The Prime Minister of Italy is here. The President of Finland is here as well, and of course the President of the EU. This is such a historical moment, Peter, because you have all of these world powers here. It's why the security, I've been to the White House a few times. I've never seen it this tight. All these world powers are here. There have been some reporting that Zelenskyy had to bring backup. The White House has pushed back on that. The White House said they've worked with these European allies. They've brought him in here, but this is going to be a much different meeting. The president will have to present his plan to not only Zelenskyy, but the rest of Europe.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And as has been said, the Europeans made clear to the president in the conversations before he met with Vladimir Putin, nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. The real fear going into that meeting in Anchorage was that the decisions would be made behind closed doors between Presidents Trump and Putin that basically said, hey, Donald Trump agreed on behalf of Ukraine that you're giving up land. Now, Ukraine gets to have a say. If the White House referred to that last session as a listening exercise, or the president he raised the stakes, ultimately saying he'd be disappointed if there wasn't a ceasefire. This, in a way, is another listening exercise. The question is, at the end of it, does it lead to a potential trilateral meeting where Putin, Zelensky, and Donald Trump all come together?
That's the goal for President Trump. Speaking of Ukraine, we do want to get there and go live. Our chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel, has been in Kharkiv, Ukraine, and all over the country for the past 2 weeks. Richard, we appreciate you being there live for us tonight. Richard, you've been speaking to Ukrainians, you've been speaking to military leaders, soldiers of Ukraine. What are you hearing from them about this meeting today?
So they're very nervous about this. They didn't like generally what they saw in Alaska, not just the protocol, the warm embrace, the red carpet, although they thought that was inappropriate. But most specifically, they don't like that now, according to numerous diplomats, Vladimir Putin has put down his price. And his price is 20% of Ukraine and more. So he currently controls 20% of this country, but he apparently wants that and new territory in exchange for stopping Russian attacks against this country. And Ukrainians don't understand this. Why should he be rewarded just because the front lines are frozen? Russian troops haven't been able to make advances against the Ukrainians, just the same way the Ukrainians have not been able to make advances against the Russians. The front lines for the last year or so have been deadlocked. It is a meat grinder. Both sides are losing a tremendous amount of men, injuries and deaths. But the Ukrainians don't understand why it is why their country that has to give up land and reward the aggressor.
Richard,
and they're very worried
Richard,
about any kind of security guarantees.
Richard, we thank you. Just stand by for us. We're going to go into the White House right now and listen in to see if any questions are being asked or if they say anything.
Not too long.
No, very short. Very short.
Between us.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to have the President of Ukraine with us. We've had a lot of good discussions, a lot of good talks, and I think progress is being made, very, very substantial progress in many ways. We had a good meeting, as you know, just a short while ago with the President of Russia. And I think there's a possibility that something could come out of it. And today's meeting is very important. We have, I guess, the seven very powerful leaders from Europe. And we're going to be meeting with them right after this meeting. And thank you very much for being here.
Thanks so much, Mr. President. If I can, first of all, thank you for invitation and thank you very much for your efforts, personal efforts to stop killings and stop this war. Thank you. And using this opportunity, many thanks to your wife, First Lady of the United States. She sent a letter to Putin about our children, abducted children, and my wife, she, First Lady of Ukraine, she gave the letter. It's not to you, to your wife.
Oh, I want it.
Yeah. So we're saying this sensitive topic. Yes, please. And thanks to our partners and that you supported this format. That after our meeting we can have leaders who are around us, UK, France, Germany, Italy, Finland, EU, NATO. I mean, all partners around Ukraine supporting us. Thanks them and thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you very much for being here.
President Trump. Right here.
Yes, Peter. Go.
Thank you, President Trump. So, President Zelensky, you say in a post on X today, Russia must end this war, which it itself started. President Trump, you say President Zelensky of Ukraine can end the war with Russia almost immediately if he wants to. Which is it?
No, I think that's true. I think they'll. We're going to have a meeting. I think if everything works out well today, we'll have a trilat. And I think there will be a reasonable chance of ending the war when we do that.
And is this the end of the road for American support for Ukraine? Is today's meeting deal or no deal?
I can never say that. It's never the end of the road. People are being killed, and we want to stop that. So I would not say it's the end of the road. No, I think we have a good chance of doing it. It's been almost 4 years now that a lot of people were killed last week. A lot of people last week. I mean, millions of people killed, but a lot of people last week for whatever reason. A big number, a lot of soldiers, on both sides. And I know the president, I know myself, and I believe Vladimir Putin wants to see it ended.
And as you met with Putin on Friday, today you've got President Zelensky here. As you listen to Russia and Ukraine, which side has the better cards right
Well, I
now?
don't want to say that. I'm just here to be. Look, this isn't my war. This is Joe Biden's war. He's the one that had a lot to do with this happening, and we want to get it ended, and we want it to end good for everybody. We want it to end good. The people of Ukraine have suffered incredibly.
And to that point, President Zelensky, are you prepared to keep sending Ukrainian troops to their deaths for another couple years, or are you going to agree to redraw the maps?
Thank you for your question. So, first of all, we live under each day attacks. You know that today have been a lot of attacks and a lot of wounded people, and the child was dead, small one year and a half. So we need to stop this war, to stop Russia, and we need support American and European partners, and we will do our best for this. So, and I think we show that we are strong people, and we supported the idea of the United States, of personally of President Trump, to stop this war, to make a diplomatic way of finishing this war, and we are ready for trilateral, as President said. This is a good signal about trilateral. I think this is very good. Thank you.
Mr. President,
Yes. If the peace deal will be achieved, are you going to be willing to send American peacekeepers to Ukraine?
Well, we're going to work with Ukraine. We're going to work with everybody, and we're going to make sure that if there's peace, the peace is going to stay long-term. This is very long-term. We're not talking about a 2-year peace, and then we end up in this mess again. We're going to make sure that everything's good. We'll work with Russia. We're going to work with Ukraine, and we're going to make sure it works. And I think if we can get to peace, it's going to work. I have no doubt about it.
President Zelensky, go ahead.
Your team has talked about security guarantees. Could that involve U.S. troops? Would you roll that out in the future?
We'll let you know that maybe later today. We're meeting with 7 great leaders of great countries also, and we'll be talking about that. They'll all be involved, but there'll be a lot of help. When it comes to security, there's going to be a lot of help. It's going to be good. They are first line of defense because they're there. They're Europe. But we're going to help them out also. We'll be involved. Yes.
Vladimir Putin mentioned that the war will not end without addressing the root causes of this war. Have you had an understanding what are the root causes of this war?
Well, look, the war is going to end. When it ends, I can't tell you, but the war is going to end, and this gentleman wants it to end, and Vladimir Putin wants it to end. I think the whole world is tired of it, and we're going to get it ended. It was, I've done 6 wars. I've ended 6 wars, and I thought this maybe would be the easiest one, and it's not the easiest one. It's a tough one. A lot of reasons for it, and they'll be talking about it for a long time. But they'll be talking about the others. Look, India, Pakistan. We're talking about the big places. When you look at, you just take a look at some of these wars. You go to Africa and take a look at that. Rwanda and the Congo, Republic of the Congo. That's been going on for 31 years. And so we've done a total of 6, and we really have 6, not including the fact that we obliterated, and it turned out to be a total obliteration, the nuclear, as you saw, the future nuclear capability of Iran. And this one, I think we're going to get solved also. I feel confident we're going to get it solved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can you tell us about your conversations with European leaders and what they need to see to support an end to the war?
Well, we're going to be meeting with a great representative group and 7 very powerful, very big countries, great people, all friends of mine and friends of yours. And we're going to have some suggestions made. They want to see peace. They would like to see peace.
You said last night that
President Trump, do you think it's fair for Ukraine and for Russia to achieve a lasting and durable peace if Ukraine cedes its territories that Russia hasn't yet conquered? Do you think it's a fair peace for Ukraine?
We're going to have a lasting peace. Just to answer the first part of your question, we're going to have a lasting peace. I hope it's going to be immediately. I hope it doesn't have to go on. And I think people of the whole world is going to be very happy when that's announced. Jeffrey.
Mr. President, you posted on social media, Mr. President, a very touching letter from the First Lady, and the letter was hand-delivered to President Putin, and it calls for an end to the war, essentially, because of the children and the children's future. Why did the First Lady feel that letter was necessary? Was it because she believes that Mr. Putin is the aggressor in the war? Is a similar letter being hand-delivered to President Zelenskyy?
So the First Lady felt very strongly. She's watched the same thing that you watch and that I watch. I see things that you don't get to see, and it's horrible. But when she's got a great love of children, she has a wonderful son that she loves, probably more than anybody, including me. I hate to say it, but she loves her son. She loves children. And she hates to see something like this happening, and that goes for other wars too. I mean, she sees the heartbreak, the parents, the funerals that you see on television. Always funerals. We want to see something other than funerals. No, she felt it was a beautiful letter. It was very well received by him, and she did ask me to say, she would love to see this end. She would love to see it end, and she says it very openly, very proudly, and with great sorrow because so many people have been killed.
Mr. President, last week, Mr. President.
Yes, sir. I've got a question for each of you. First of all, Mr. President Zelenskyy, you look fabulous in that suit.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, you look good.
I said the same thing.
Yeah.
Isn't that nice? That's the one that attacked you last time. See, now
I remember that.
I apologize to you. You look wonderful. No, my first question for you, President Zelenskyy.
In the same suit. I changed your.
Maybe yours is much better than mine. Real quickly, upon peace, God willing we get peace, are you open to holding an election in your country?
Yes, of course. We are open for election, yes. We have to do safety circumstances, and a little bit we need to work in the parliament, because during the war you can't have elections, but we can do security. We need, we need a truth, yes, everywhere, in the battlefield, in the sky, and the sea, to make possible for people to do democratic, open, legal elections.
So you say during the war you can't have elections. So let me just say 3.5 years from now. So you mean if we happen to be in a war with somebody, no more elections? Oh, that's good. I wonder what the fake.
You like this idea?
No. Speaking of news, I got a question for you. This sounds insane for me even to ask this, but do you think the American media really doesn't even want a peace deal? Because they've seen they've been so critical of you every step of the way as you lead the charge for peace.
It's an amazing phenomenon. I said that if in the settlement you got Moscow, St. Petersburg, and thousands of miles around them, they would say, I made a bad deal. The level of hatred and animosity is incredible. Not with all. I mean, we have great people up here. We also have terrible people up there that I think are told what to say. But, in solving all of these wars, they don't even write about it. I saw major wars. I saw wars that have been going on for 31, 35, and 37, and a couple of quicker ones. One that was going to go into a full-blown deal very quickly. You know what the one I'm talking about. It was a big one. But they don't even write about that. No matter what I do, no matter what, and this is not anything to do with you. It's probably to your advantage in a certain way. But no matter what I do, no matter what deal I make, from my standpoint, you'll come out good. Maybe President Putin will come out good. But they'll say Trump was absolutely horrible. It's just that, and I've lived with that for a long time. I've lived with it since just before the first election. I used to get great publicity. Now I get the worst publicity anyone's ever gotten in office, but I won in a landslide, so the people understand. They're the only ones that count, ultimately. But I've also had great reporters. I've had journalists that are very good. But it's very sad when you do the right thing. As an example, they said, because of the fact that Vladimir Putin came to American soil, this was a tremendous defeat for Donald Trump. No, it was really wonderful that he did it. It was a hard thing for him to do, to be honest with you. It was the opposite of what they said, but they said it. Now, if he didn't come, they'd say that was also bad for Trump. Yeah, there's no way. And there's just a great dishonesty of the press, and I think that's why it's lost its credibility. You know, its credibility is at an all-time low. We have a thing going on right now in D.C. We went from the most unsafe place anywhere to a place that now friends are calling me up, Democrats are calling me up, and they're saying, sir, I want to thank you. My wife and I went out to dinner last night for the first time in 4 years, and Washington, D.C. is safe, and you did that in 4 days. I'll tell you it's safe. I had another friend of mine. He has a son who's a great golfer. He's on tour, and he came in fourth yesterday in the big tournament where Scotty Scheffler made the great shot, and he said his son is going to dinner in Washington, D.C. tonight. I said, would you have allowed that to happen a year ago? He said, no way, no way. He said, what you've done is incredible. And I think the people realize it. But the press says, he's a dictator, he's trying to take over. No, all I want is security for our people. But people that haven't gone out to dinner in Washington, D.C. in 2 years are going out to dinner. And the restaurants the last 2 days were busier than they've been in a long time.
So I walked around yesterday with MTG. If you can walk around with D.C. with MTG and not be attacked, the city is safe.
Sir, on the security
Thank you, Mr. President. Last week, you warned of what you called severe consequences if a 30-day ceasefire or any type of ceasefire were not agreed to by Russia. Will there be severe consequences? Does that change because of your meeting with the President?
I don't think you need a ceasefire. You know, if you look at the 6 deals that I settled this year, they were all at war. I didn't do any ceasefires. And I know that it might be good to have, but I can also understand strategically why, well, you know, one country or the other wouldn't want it. You have a ceasefire and they rebuild and rebuild and rebuild, and, you know, maybe they don't want that. But if you look at the 6 deals that we made peace, and you know, long-term, long-running wars, I didn't do any ceasefires. Would I like the concept. You know, I like the concept of a ceasefire for one reason, because you'd stop killing people immediately, as opposed to in 2 weeks or 1 week or whatever it takes. But we can work a deal where we're working on a peace deal while they're fighting. They have to fight. I wish they could stop. I'd like them to stop. But strategically, that could be a disadvantage for one side or the other. But all of these deals I made without even the mention of the words ceasefire.
President Zelenskyy, are you disappointed that there's no ceasefire?
Decision to offer Ukraine Article 5 like security guarantees would stop short of pushing for their full membership.
Yeah, well, we haven't done anything on that yet. If you look back and you go back long before President Putin, it was always a statement that they would never allow Ukraine into NATO. So that was a statement that was made. But we haven't discussed any of that yet. We're going to be discussing it today. But we will give them very good protection, very good security. That's part of it. And the people that are waiting for us, they are, I think they're very like-minded. They want to help out also.
Thank you, President Trump. The United States has already given hundreds of billions of dollars to this war effort in Ukraine. At best, it is a stalemate, and the killing continues. So, President Trump, how much more is the United States willing to give Ukraine? And President Zelenskyy, how much more do you want?
Well, I'll start off just by saying we're not giving anything now. We're selling weapons. This is something before, I guess the number's well over $300 billion. That was under Joe Biden, a corrupt politician, not a smart man, never was. By the way, go back 40 years. He was not a smart man 40 years ago either, but now he's in particular bad. This was done by a corrupt administration that shouldn't have been in, and frankly, if the right results of the election were given, if I were president, this war would have never taken place, and he would have been very happy. because he would have liked to have seen. I mean, they went through hell. He went through hell. This war would have never happened, and the people that were killed, a couple of million people, a lot of people with soldiers and everything else, and the people that have been displaced and forced into other areas and other countries because of what's happened, none of that would have happened. And I'm just saying that he was a horrible president, whether it was the borders or this. He was just a horrible, corrupt president.
Thank you so much. So first of all, we have possibility now to buy weapons from the United States. We are thankful for this program and this opportunity. We are thankful for Europe. They pay for this. And through NATO program, for example, Pearl and etc., we have some programs where we can have some money to finance this. And this is a part, I think, it's not a part for the war and to defend us. It also will be a part for security guarantees, to strengthen our army, to rearm Ukrainian army. This is very, very important. And it depends how much money we need to rearm. For example, the question of air defense, we spoke about it with President Trump, and I'm happy that we have now bilateral decisions and we work on it with production, American production. Nobody in Europe has so many air defense like Patriots, for example. We need it very much, and this is also about defending.
I think the good news, we make the best military equipment in the world by far. You mentioned the Patriots. How good are they?
Systems.
We have systems, they're literally 100% foolproof. And it's really like shooting two bullets, two bullets hitting each other in the air in a space like this. The chance is 100%. It's 99 to 100%. So we sell the equipment to NATO. And NATO does what, I don't know what the arrangement is that you have with, but I know that they want you to have the equipment. And we're getting the best equipment in the world, but they pay us for the equipment. Under Biden, it was just crazy what was going on. I believe the number is over 300. I think it could be $350 billion worth of equipment and money and everything else. And we've made more progress in settling this war in the last 2 months than they made in 4 years. This should have been settled a long time ago, but it should have never happened. Yeah, please.
Real quickly, you pushed out on social media.
Brian, go first.
You pushed out on social media about doing away with mail-in ballots and potentially electronic voting machines. Can you expand on that and how important
Well, that's a very off-topic. Just really quickly. Mail-in ballots are corrupt. Mail-in ballots, you can never have a real democracy with mail-in ballots. And we, as a Republican Party, are going to do everything possible that we get rid of mail-in ballots. We're going to start with an executive order that's being written right now by the best lawyers in the country to end mail-in ballots because they're corrupt. And you know that we're the only country in the world, I believe, I may be wrong, but just about the only country in the world that uses them because of what's happened. Massive fraud all over the place. The other thing we want change are the machines. For all of the money they spend, it's approximately 10 times more expensive than paper ballots. And paper ballots are very sophisticated with the watermark paper and everything else. We would get secure elections. We'd get much faster results. The machines, I mean, they say we're going to have the results in 2 weeks. With paper ballots, you have the results that night. Most people, but most people, many countries use paper ballots. It's the most secure form. So between paper ballots, very, very important, paper ballots, and I think maybe even more important, the mail-in voting. We're going to end mail-in voting. It's a fraud. If you have mail-in vote, even Jimmy Carter with this commission, they set it up. He said the one thing about mail-in voting, you will never have an honest election if you have mail-in. And it's time that the Republicans get tough and stop it because the Democrats want it. It's the only way they can get elected. Because with men and women's sports and with transgender for everybody and open borders and all of the horrible things, and now the new thing is they love crime. They're fighting me on the fact that I've made Washington, D.C. safe. We're not going to get mugged, beaten up, or killed like all the people you've been watching get so badly hurt. I'm glad, I hate to take your time with this, but I'm glad you asked me that question. We're going to stop mail-in ballots because it's corrupt. You know, when you go to a voting booth and you do it the right way, and you go to a state that runs it properly, you go in. They even ask me. They asked me for my license plate for identity. I said, I don't know if I have it. They said, sir, you have to have it. I was very impressed, actually. But it's very hard to cheat with mail-in voting. As you know what happens in California, it's so corrupt, where some people get 5, 6, 7 ballots delivered to them. Now, we got to stop mail-in voting, and the Republicans have to lead the charge. The Democrats want it because they have horrible policy. If you have mail-in voting, you're not going to have many Democrats get elected. That's bigger than anything having to do with redistricting, believe me. And the Republicans have to get smart. We're not going to have a country. I said for a long time at rallies, you need borders and you need free and fair elections. Those two things. Otherwise, you don't have. We have strong borders now. In 90 days, Mr. President, we didn't have 0, 0, and 3 months. Not one person came in illegally into our country. In fact, even I find that hard to believe, but it's run by a little bit of a liberal group that put out the numbers, so I guess it's, but 0, 0, and 0. You go back a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 millions of people poured into our country. It was terrible. Thank you very much.
What security guarantees do you need from President Trump to be able to make a deal? Is it American troops, intelligence, equipment? What is it?
Everything. And really, it includes two parts. First, strong Ukrainian army. That's what I began to discuss with your colleagues. And it's a lot about weapon and then people and training missions and intelligence. And second, we will discuss with our partners. It depends on the big countries, on the United States, on a lot of our friends.
Mr. President, are you willing to commit American troops to that NATO-like protection in order to get President Zelenskyy to a deal today?
Well, I don't know if you define it that way, but NATO-like, I mean, we're going to give, we have people waiting in another room right now. They're all here from Europe, biggest people in Europe, and they want to give protection. They feel very strongly about it, and we'll help them out with that. I think it's very important. I think it's very important to get the deal.
You've been involved with the peacekeeping in Ukraine since your first day in the administration. What would you say to the Ukrainian people right now who are suffering under the Russian attacks and hoping that the American people will stand with them?
Well, I know Ukrainian people. I've known many over the years. They're great people. They're smart. They're energetic. They love their country. I mean, they love their country, and we want to get this war ended. That's all I can do. I love the Ukrainian people, but I love all people. I love the Russian people. I love them all. I want to get the war stopped. Very important.
Mr. President, was there any aspect of your discussion with Vladimir Putin that left you disappointed?
Look, we just spoke to, I was just telling the president, I just spoke to President Putin indirectly, and we're going to have a phone call right after these meetings today. And we may or may not have a trilat. If we don't have a trilat, then the fighting continues. And if we do, we have a good chance. I think if we have a trilat, there's a good chance of maybe ending it. But he's expecting my call when we're finished with this meeting. Thank you very much.
We've just been listening to President Trump and President Zelenskyy inside the Oval Office. This meeting taking a much different turn than the first meeting 6 months ago when that meeting blew up. Here, both men seem to be welcoming to each other, listening to each other, and sort of working hand in hand. This is one of the first big steps for President Trump in trying to achieve peace in Ukraine. Two major headlines to come out of this right now. The president was asked twice if he would commit to bringing U.S. troops to Ukraine as a peacekeeping force. Both times he didn't commit one way or the other, not saying he would or he would not, but he was asked that question twice. And what just happened seconds ago, it sounds like the president's timeline for this is very fast. He says right after this meeting with Volodymyr Zelenskyy and the European leaders, he's going to call President Putin. He hopes to have that trilateral meeting pretty soon, is what he said, to get the three leaders on board. It is still unclear what is part of this peace proposal, what is in the plan. Is the land going to be swapped? Is the land going to be taken for Russia? Are there going to be peacekeeping troops there? Still a lot of outstanding questions that we hope to get some answers from. Peter Alexander, our chief White House correspondent, joins me here in the North Lawn of the White House. Peter, it was pretty stunning, right? Each moment here, we're learning more and more. It sounds like the president and President Zelenskyy are in a good place for now. They were both sort of complementary of each other, if you will.
So the first takeaway, I think, is the tone there, right? Amicable, not angry compared to last time. One thing struck me in particular, you remember J.D. Vance, the first go around, he specifically said, calling out Zelenskyy, said, "Have you said thank you once?" Wow. I noted that the first words out of Zelenskyy's mouth were thank you. He said it more than a dozen times in the course of those comments.
Thanking for the weapons as well.
Thanking for the weapons, thanking the United States, thanking the European allies. That was one thing that was significant. The other thing that obviously hung over this was the topic of wardrobe, right? When he came in, just for optics, and those matter to the president, who in many ways produces his own presidency. The very same reporter who last go around asked Zelenskyy why he wasn't wearing a proper suit, a gentleman by the name of Brian Glenn, who it turns out is dating MTG, as he says, Marjorie Taylor Greene. He says, "I thought your suit looks pretty good here." Zelenskyy notably had a pretty quick retort here. He says, "It looks like you are wearing the same suit." You'll remember Zelenskyy was a former comedian, is a comedian. He produced and created Servant to the People, a popular show which helped his rise to power, much like his television chops here in the U.S. helped Donald Trump's rise as well. There were also questions that were answered this time around compared to no questions that were answered when Vladimir Putin met with the president just recently. And then one important fact check here, as long as we're keeping our audience aware. The president says he thinks the U.S. has spent $300 to maybe $350 billion. The number is much closer to $174 billion, 5 separate packages that were passed by Congress right now in the form of supplemental funding to Ukraine, not just to Ukraine, but some of its allies in the region. So while the president has inflated that number, it's still certainly a lot of money, but nowhere near the $300 billion he insists.
Yeah, this meeting a little bit off schedule, went 30 minutes longer probably than everyone expected, but the president, of course, answering questions, and taking a lot of questions as well. I want to bring in Keir Simmons, our chief international correspondent, who's been observing all of this from Europe right now. Keir, talk to us about some of the things you noticed. I know you and I were exchanging messages. That question, the 2 questions about American peacekeeping troops was quite interesting because we know both the UK and the French have committed to peacekeeping troops in Russia. But this is interesting. NATO troops, Vladimir Putin would never go for. But do you think he would be okay with troops from the UK, possibly the US and France there in Ukraine?
You know, Tom, it's evening in Moscow, and you bet in the Kremlin they will have been watching that closely. They will have been disappointed, as you have just pointed out, not to have seen another blowout between President Zelenskyy and President Trump and Vice President Vance. They will be noting the way that the Ukrainians appear to be more careful in the way they approach President Trump, handing over the letter from the Ukrainian First Lady, as Peter mentioned, saying thank you multiple times. But it was also interesting, and you point to it, what wasn't said. I mean, President Trump was asked specifically an absolutely crucial question: are you willing to send U.S. peacekeepers to Ukraine? And he didn't answer that question. And why is that so important? Because the man you saw sitting there, President Zelenskyy, will have to put a huge amount on the line if he was to agree to ceding the amount of territory that appears to have come out of the proposal on Friday. Maybe even, as Richard said earlier, ceding more territory. It looks like what he is potentially going to be offered in exchange for that is a security guarantee that Russia will not invade again, will not renew its offensive. And you can see there from the map just how much land is still held by the Russians, and how that land runs down to Crimea, and so how the Russians are very unlikely to agree to negotiate over that. So if President Zelenskyy is going to get the security guarantees that he clearly needs, then President Trump is at the very least going to need to say that the United States will support the security of Ukraine. If that means boots on the ground, or if that means a promise that the US would send boots on the ground in the case of President Putin renewing his offensive, is that something that President Trump will agree to? And I think that's going to be one of the crucial questions that's going to be discussed right now as they head off for these meetings with European leaders.
Keir, stand by for us. I do want to bring in our moderator of Meet the Press, Kristen Welker. Kristen, it is clear that both the president and the first lady are putting a full court press on both Russia and Ukraine to get this peace deal. There was that striking moment there where Volodymyr Zelenskyy presented a letter to President Trump from his wife. And this, of course, in reaction to the first lady, Melania Trump, sending a letter to Putin, telling her that because of the children, they should end this war and to think about those children. Because one of the big factors here, one of the points of contention are the Ukrainian children, the Ukrainian families that are currently now in Russia-controlled parts of Ukraine. And what happens to them if there is some type of peace treaty that is signed? What happens to them if Russia keeps the land that they invaded and have now conquered? What happens to all those families? Do they now have to start speaking a different language and become Russian citizens, or can they go back to Ukraine? But I am struck by the timeline that the president said, right? He came out and said, listen, right after this meeting, we're going to meet with the European leaders, and then I'm calling President Putin, and we want to get that trilateral on the calendar.
The timeline was incredibly notable, Tom, as are the other points that you just made. But first, the timeline. The fact that he's saying he's going to call President Putin at the conclusion of this day, it fits into the broader tone we've heard from this president signaling he wants to have that trilateral maybe as early as this week. A lot of skepticism about whether that can actually happen. And European allies concerned. They don't want this process to be rushed, Tom. They want to get it right. To that point about the children, it's so fascinating because the First Lady and to some extent some lawmakers, Senator Lindsey Graham, Senator Richard Blumenthal, are really trying to make those kidnapped children the focus of ending this war. In fact, Senators Graham and Blumenthal out with potential legislation that they may introduce that would label Russia a state sponsor of terrorism if those children are not returned. So really trying to open up a new front in the argument for why this war needs to end and really trying to ramp up the pressure on Russia. On that point about a security agreement, Tom, I've been talking to Ukrainian and European sources, and they say the key there is making sure that it's durable. So that means effectively that it would need to be signed into law by Congress. This is something that would need to be ratified, not just something that's a handshake, not just something that's signed by these leaders, but something that actually becomes U.S. law. So that's the type of pressure at the backdrop of this historic summit today, Tom.
All right, Kristen Welker, we thank you for that. I want to go back to Richard Engel, who's reporting live for us in Ukraine. Richard, I have two questions for you. First, your observations of what you saw and heard inside the Oval Office. But first, I want you to walk our viewers through the state of play in Ukraine right now. There are still people being killed, families being killed in Ukraine right now. And even though these peace talks are sort of at the beginning stage, the bombing has not stopped.
So this all looks very different, Tom, from here in Ukraine. President Zelenskyy talked about how families are still being killed, and he mentioned a child, a 1.5-year-old child killed today. I just returned from the apartment building where that child was killed. It's just a few minutes away from here in the city of Kharkiv. And although Russia says every single day that it only attacks military targets, that it doesn't target civilians in Ukraine, that is not true. And we saw that once again this morning. The building that you're showing right now was hit by 6 different Russian drones in quick succession. And it was a civilian apartment building full of families. We saw pets, we saw plants. There were no soldiers inside there. At least 7 people killed. And in the early morning hours, the drones started coming in. One exploded, and then about 30 seconds later, the next, and 30 seconds later, the next. So this was not an accident. This was not a rogue drone that happened to hit an apartment building. This building was targeted, and 7 people were killed, including this 1.5-year-old girl and all of her family. Her grandmother was also killed, and her 2 parents. That kind of attack, which Ukrainians consider terrorism, happens every single day here, and they are watching this, Ukrainians are watching this peace process, watching this summit, and don't understand why it is Ukraine that must surrender its territory. Why isn't more pressure being put on Vladimir Putin, not just to stop the attacks? And by the way, you can hear the air raid sirens right now if you listen closely in the background. So there are more attacks happening as we speak. So this is a daily way of life here, and many Ukrainians think that pressure must be put on Putin to not only stop the attacks like the one that killed that family and others at the apartment building a short while ago, not far from here, but the constant attacks. And also, you mentioned a very important point, Tom. You said, what happens to the people, the Ukrainians who live in those areas, this 20% of the country, or 20% plus, if Putin gets his way, that may have to be surrendered to Russia? They become Russians. We've spoken to people in those occupied areas. They live like prisoners. They are told to forget their Ukrainian identity. You can't fly the Ukrainian flag. You can't speak the Ukrainian language. It is not used officially. They are part of Russia, and as far as Russia concerns, they are only Russian, and their Ukrainian identity is perceived to be a threat. So this isn't just a bitter pill that Ukrainians have to swallow. They're facing the possibility of losing 20% of their country or more, and the people there, and having those people being indoctrinated and turned into Russian citizens. And that is something that it's not even clear President Zelenskyy could deliver on, even if he wanted to. It's not clear that the people here would accept that and would stop fighting.
Richard, we thank you for your reporting, but as we hear those air raid sirens, I want to make sure you and your team can get to your safety plan and figure out what you need to do in the coming minutes, but we thank you for being with us. Peter, I want to bring you back into this conversation. There's a lot of unknowns here, right? And I think one of the big questions for everyone, including the Ukrainians most of all, is what is going to come out of these meetings? Yeah. Will we get a sense of what the details of this deal are? Is it a land negotiation? Is it a peacekeeping negotiation? And how much of this has Vladimir Putin agreed to? And will Europe and the rest of the world believe him?
It's good questions. First, that requires there to be a deal, right? We've heard from one party, Vladimir Putin, the president spoke to with his aides a matter of days ago. What does he hear privately from Volodymyr Zelenskyy today? What are the Europeans on board with in terms of security guarantees going forward? We're obviously going to focus heavily on the potential that the president is willing to offer up U.S. troops in some form. That seems to go against much of the MAGA positions that he's taken from the very beginning. But already there's some things that they would be at odds about. You remember the president went into that meeting on Friday saying that he wanted to see a ceasefire. He wouldn't be happy if there wasn't one. Today he said, among other things, I don't think you need a ceasefire, which is a significant embrace of Vladimir Putin's view on this, where Ukraine has long said you need a ceasefire first. Had there been a ceasefire on Friday, those 14 Ukrainians who were killed in the last day or so in Ukraine would still be living right now. So that's going to be one key hump, is how do they get over that? Then what happens beyond that in terms of the security guarantees? What is the U.S. and what are the European allies willing to give? And ultimately, at the end of the day, it comes down to that land in many ways. The Constitution in Ukraine, as Zelenskyy has made clear many times, doesn't let him make this decision on his own, whether it's going to cede land. The president says this thing would be over in a hurry if you were willing to do so. Can all of this happen overnight? There are a lot of lines that still have to be drawn by all parties here for this to come to a conclusion, but certainly it is tremendous progress in the fact that these conversations are happening, and it turns out they're all happening in many ways in one place, with the president in attendance here at the White House.
Still a very busy day here at the White House. We're going to have the meeting that's happening right now, the bilateral between Ukraine and the U.S., President Trump and President Zelenskyy. And then those European leaders that are still here in the White House are going to meet with both presidents, and they're going to talk about the proposal for peace that we know of. There's going to be a lunch between all parties, and possibly we will hear from some of these European leaders and from President Zelenskyy and President Trump again later today about what has been hashed out. The president announcing he's going to call Vladimir Putin after the meetings here and talk about how much they've accomplished, and he hopes to have a trilateral meeting at some point pretty soon in the near future. That's going to conclude this NBC News special report. We're monitoring today's meeting at the White House, and we'll have more coverage of the president's meeting with European leaders. For now, we'll have more on our streaming network, NBC News Now. I'm Tom Yamas, reporting from the White House. We thank you for watching.
Hey everyone, I'm Morgan Chesky here in Los Angeles. Kate and Zinkley have the day off, and NBC News Daily starts right now.
White House. We want to go live right now into the East Room where President Trump is meeting with President Zelenskyy and other European leaders. Let's listen in.
All of the wonderful things that took place today. We've had a very successful day thus far. And important discussions as we work to end the killing and stop the war in Ukraine. We're all working for the same goal, very simple goal. We want to stop the killing, get this settled. I've just had the honor of being with President Zelenskyy and all of the discussions that we've had. We covered a lot of territory, and I spoke indirectly with President Putin today. We're going to call President Putin right after this meeting. I'm sure we're going to have a solid meeting, good meeting, maybe a great meeting, and we're going to try and work out a trilat after that and see if we can get it finished, put this to sleep, because this is not since the Second World War has there been anything like this. So I'm honored to welcome NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who's a great gentleman, great political leader in Europe generally, but now he's the NATO Secretary General, and you're doing a fantastic job. Thank you very much, Mark. Prime Minister Starmer of the United Kingdom, our friend and my friend, and doing really well. And people like him a lot. We all like him. Everyone knows President Macron of France, who's been with me from the beginning, one of the first people I met as a foreign dignitary, and I liked him from day one. And I like him even more now. That's pretty good. That's unusual. That's a pretty unusual thing. Prime Minister Meloni of Italy, who's a really a great leader and an inspiration over there. She's served now, even though she's a very young person, she's served there for a long period of time relative to others. They don't last very long. You've lasted a long time. You're going to be there a long time. Chancellor Merz of Germany, who is a very strong person and a very strong leader and very highly respected in Germany. And he's my friend, and it's an honor to have him as my friend. Thank you very much. Very good. You look great with your tan. Where did you get that tan? I want to get a tan like that.
That's true.
President Stubb of Finland, and he's somebody that, where are we here? Where? I'm right
here.
Oh. You look better than I've ever seen you look. But you've done a great job, and we wanted to have you here because you're somebody that we all respect. And you've had a lot to do with the success, I think, and the potential success. And thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it. And the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, who is somebody that we just made a big deal with all of those countries. I don't know. I think you might be more powerful than all these guys at this table. I don't know. But we had a great negotiation, and you're respected all over the world. So I want to thank you very much for being here. It's a great honor to have you. The Alaska summit reinforced my belief that while difficult, peace is within reach, and I believe that in a very significant step, President Putin agreed that Russia would accept security guarantees for Ukraine, and this is one of the key points that we need to consider, and we're going to be considering that at the table also, like who will do what, essentially. I'm optimistic that collectively we can reach an agreement that would deter any future aggression against Ukraine, and I actually think there won't be. I think that's even overrated, largely overrated, but we're going to find out, and I think that the European nations are going to take a lot of the burden. We're going to help them, and we're going to make it very secure. We also need to discuss the possible exchanges of territory, taking into consideration the current line of contact. That means the war zone, the war lines that are pretty obvious, very sad, actually, to look at them. And negotiating positions. President Putin, also, you have President of Ukraine, who is you just met a little while ago, and we're going to try and get a three-party meeting, maybe as soon as we can. And I have a feeling you and President Putin are going to work something out. Ultimately, this is a decision that can only be made by President Zelenskyy and by the people of Ukraine working also together in agreement with President Putin. And I just think that's very good things are going to come of it. So I hope we have a good meeting. And if we can have a good meeting, I'll set up a meeting with President Putin. And if you'd like, I'll go to that meeting. And not that I want to do that, but I will do that because we want to save a lot of people from dying. A lot of people are dying, and we got to save them. Got to save it. 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 people sometimes a week. All of us would obviously prefer an immediate ceasefire while we work on a lasting peace, and maybe something like that could happen. As of this moment, it's not happening, but President Zelenskyy and President Putin can talk a little bit more about that. You know, in the 6 or so wars that we stopped, we haven't had a ceasefire. And so I don't know that it's necessary. You can do it through the war, but it would be, I like the ceasefire from another standpoint. You immediately stop the killing. But I believe a peace agreement at the end of all of this is something that's very attainable, and it can be done in the near future. With all of the wars that I got involved in, we only have this one left. Of course, as I walk out the door, there'll probably be a new one starting, and I'll get that stopped too. But I thought this was going to be one of the easier ones. It's actually one of the most difficult. They're very complex. The next step would be for a trilateral meeting, and that will be worked out. And I just look forward to working and having a great result. We're going to spend a lot of time today talking about, and we're really honored you guys came over. I mean, these are the heads of major countries and respected all over Europe. And they speak for, largely, I think I should say, but pretty much for the other countries of Europe. And we will come to a resolution today, I think, on almost everything, including probably the security. And that's pretty much the story. I'd like to say, Mr. President, would you like to say something? You have the media. If you want, you could come over and you could stand, you could use mine, or you could just turn around, whichever you feel comfortable with.
Thank you so much. I can speak without microphone. Thank you so much. I think that we had very good conversation with President Trump.
Very good.
And it really was the best one. Or sorry, maybe the best one will be in the future. But it was really good. And we spoke about very sensitive points. The first one is security guarantees. And we are very happy with President that all the leaders are here, and security in Ukraine depends on the United States and on you and on those leaders who are with us in our hearts. They have been online before yesterday, and etc. So a lot of countries on the side of Ukraine, our people, and all of us want to finish this war, stop Russia and stop this war. We spoke about it, and we will speak more about security guarantees. This is very important that the United States gives such strong signal and is ready for security guarantees. The second point, or maybe the first, the humanitarian direction, very important to exchange all the prisoners, and I think that President will help. And I was very thankful to your wife again, Mr. President, for the letter about our abducted children, and I hope that really it can be a historic role for the people to bring kids back to the families and be happy and
get the people back. Yeah.
Yes, this is so important, and I'm happy that we discussed it, this track with the President Trump, and I hope that we will find decisions. And then what is very important, that all the sensitive things, territorial, etc., we will discuss on the level of leaders during trilateral meeting, and President Trump will try to organize such meeting, and he said that he will come or not come. Ukraine will be happy if you will
both want me there, I will be there. Yeah,
yeah,
you know
thank you. And I think this is very important. Yes, so security guarantees, bringing kids back, and all our people, not only warriors, first of all warriors, and all the civilians, journalists, a lot of people in prison. So we need them back. And guarantees which will work for the years. We spoke about it, and I showed to President a lot of details on the battlefield, on the map. Thank you so much. Thank you for the map, by the way.
Good map.
It was great. Yeah. I'm thinking how to take it back.
We'll get you.
No. I think that we had constructive, specific meeting, and I'm very thankful to all the leaders who are here, and you help a lot, and so we're happy that
we have such big unity today. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much,
for hosting us.
Mr. President. I think you'll see that President Putin really would like to do something else. I think when we set that up, when we do, I think it's going to be when, not if. I think you're going to see some really positive moves. I know there's over 1,000 prisoners, and I know they're going to release them. Maybe they're going to release them very soon, like immediately, which I think is great. But we're going to set that up today after this meeting. So very good and great remarks. I appreciate it. Mark, as head of NATO, maybe you could say a few words, please.
Yes, I will be very brief. I really want to thank you, President of the United States, dear Donald, for the fact that you, as I said before, broke the deadlock, basically, with President Putin by starting that dialogue. And I think it was in February that you had the first phone call, and from there we are now where we are today. And that is, I think, if we play this well, we could end this. And we have to end this. We have to stop the killing. We have to stop the destruction of Ukraine's infrastructure. It is a terrible war. So I'm really excited. And let's make the best out of today and make sure that from today onwards, we get this thing to an end as soon as possible. I really want to thank you for your leadership, what you are doing for Volodymyr, but of course also all the European colleagues. It is really crucial. And the fact that you have said, I'm willing to participate in the security guarantees is a big step. Is really a breakthrough, and it makes all the difference. So also thank you for that.
Well, NATO also has agreed from 2% to 5%, which is something that is a massive amount of money. And it's 2% that wasn't always paid to 5% that is paid. That's a big difference. And so we appreciate that. That was a great move. Thank you very much. Ursula, maybe on behalf of the Commission, you could say a couple of words.
Yes. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's a very important moment. Indeed, we are here, Europeans, as friends and allies. We had a fantastic NATO summit. Together as the two largest and biggest economies in the world, we had the largest trade deal ever agreed. And now we are here to work together with you on a just and lasting peace for Ukraine. Stop the killing. This is really our common interest, stop the killing. And indeed, it's very good to hear that we're working on the security guarantees, Article 5 lies security guarantees, so important. But I want to thank you also that you mentioned the thousands of Ukrainian children that have been abducted. And as a mother and grandmother, every single child has to go back to its family. This should be one of our main priorities also in these negotiations, to make sure that the children come back to Ukraine, to their families.
Thank you. And we did. I was just thinking we're here for a different reason, but we just a couple of weeks ago made the largest trade deal in history. So that's a big thing, and congratulations. That's great. Thank you very much, Ursula. Mr. Chancellor from Germany, a very great leader.
Mr. President,
Please.
dear Donald, many thanks for having us today. I think this is extremely helpful that we are meeting and hearing that the two of you are having such a good meeting today here in Washington. The next steps ahead are the more complicated ones now. The path is open. You opened it last Friday. But now the way is open for complicated negotiations. And to be honest, we all would like to see a ceasefire, the latest from the next meeting on. I can't imagine that the next meeting would take place without a ceasefire. So let's work on that, and let's try to put pressure on Russia, because the credibility of these efforts we are undertaking today are depending on at least a ceasefire from the beginning of the serious negotiations from next step on. So I would like to emphasize this aspect and would like to see a ceasefire from the next meeting, which should be a trilateral meeting wherever it takes place.
Well, we're going to let the president go over and talk to the president, and we'll see how that works out, and if we can do that. I will say, and again I say it, in the 6 wars that I've settled, I haven't had a ceasefire. We just got into negotiations, and one of the wars was, as you know, in the Congo was 31 years long. Another one that we settled last week with 2 great countries was 35 years going on, and we had no ceasefire. So if we can do the ceasefire, great. And if we don't do a ceasefire, because many other points were given to us, many points were given to us, great points. Please, Georgia, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, Donald, Mr. President, for hosting us today in this important meeting. And I think it is an important day, a new phase, after 3 years and a half that we didn't see any kind of sign from the Russian side that there was a willing for dialogue. So something is changing, something has changed, thanks to you. Thanks also to the stalling in the battlefield, which was achieved with the bravery of Ukrainians and with the unity that we all provided to Ukraine. And the reason why I mention it is that we also have to remind that if we want to reach peace and if we want to guarantee justice, we have to do it united. So that's why it's a very good day, the one we are in. You can obviously count on Italy as it was from the beginning. We are on the side of Ukraine, and we do absolutely support your efforts towards peace. We will talk about many important topics. The first one is security guarantees, how to be sure that it won't happen again, which is the precondition of every kind of peace. I'm happy that we will discuss about that. I'm happy that we will begin from a proposal, which is the, let's say, Article 5 model, which was Italian at the beginning. So we are always ready to bring our proposals for peace, for dialogue. It's something we have to build together to guarantee peace and to defend the security of our nation. So thank you, Mr. President, for hosting us.
Thank you very much. Emmanuel?
Thank you, Mr. President, for organizing this meeting and for your commitment. And everything was said, but I just have to say here, everybody around this table is in favor of peace. And we work very hard, and we've worked very hard during the past few years to have a peace which is a robust and long-standing peace. This is why the idea of a trilateral meeting is very important, because this is the only way to fix it. And by the way, I think as a follow-up, we would need probably a quadrilateral meeting, because when we speak about security guarantees, we speak about the whole security of the European continent. And this is why we are all united here with Ukraine on this matter. In order to organize such a trilateral meeting, your idea to ask for a truce or a ceasefire, at least to stop the killings, as we discussed, is a necessity. And we all support this idea. And in order to have such a long-standing peace for Ukraine and for the whole continent, we do need these security guarantees. And the first one is clearly a credible Ukrainian army for the years and decades to come. And the second one is our own commitment, all of us. And we worked very hard during the past few months among the coalition of the willings, with the support of NATO, to build the different pillars of security guarantees and our commitments. And you can be sure that Europeans are very lucid about the fact that they have their fair share in these security guarantees for Ukraine, but their own security is clearly at stake in this situation. So you can count on us, as we can count on you, in order to deliver this robust peace for both Ukraine and Europe.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you for hosting us here. Can I start where Emmanuel started, which is we all want peace. The war in Ukraine has had a huge impact, particularly on the Ukrainians who've borne the brunt of it, but it's also had an impact on Europe and on the United Kingdom. There's not a family or community that hasn't been affected. And when we talk about security, we're talking about the security not just of Ukraine, we're talking about the security of Europe and the United Kingdom as well, which is why this is such an important issue. I think this is such an important meeting. As a group, I think we've had a discussion on the phone a number of times, Mr. President, but be able now to be around the table to take it forward. And I really feel that we can, I think, with the right approach this afternoon, make real progress, particularly on the security guarantees, and your indication of security guarantees, of some sort of Article 5 style guarantees, fits with what we've been doing with the Coalition of the Willing, which we started some months ago, bringing countries together and showing that we were prepared to step up to the plate when it came to security. With you coming alongside, the US alongside what we've already developed, I think we could take a really important step forward today. A historic step, actually, could come out of this meeting in terms of security for Ukraine and security in Europe. I also feel that we can make real progress towards a just and lasting outcome. Obviously, that has to involve Ukraine, and a trilateral meeting seems the sensible next step. So thank you for being prepared to take that forward, because I think if we can ensure that that is the progress out of this meeting, both security guarantees and some sort of progress on trilateral meeting of some sort to bring some of the difficult issues to a head, then I think today will be seen as a very important day in recent years in relation to a conflict which has gone on for 3 and a bit years, and so far nobody's been able to bring it to this point. So I thank you for that.
Well, thank you very much. And, you know, it's very interesting because this is the first for the White House. You can't say that very often. It's seen a lot over the years, since 1800, 1799, to be almost exact. But this is the first where we've had so many prime ministers, presidents, the heads of European nations. And by the way, Alex, I'd like you to say a couple of words, too. You're a young, powerful man. Before I finish up, I want you to say a couple of words. Go ahead.
I'll take the notion of youth back to my wife and try to convince her. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I think in the past 2 weeks, we've probably had more progress in ending this war than we have in the past 3.5 years. And I think the fact that we're around this table today is very much symbolic in the sense that it's Team Europe and Team United States helping Ukraine. And the progress that we're looking out of this meeting is about the security guarantees, which are a big part of this. And then, of course, moving towards a process with a trilateral meeting with you and President Putin and President Zelenskyy. Some of the international media might wonder, why is the President of Finland here? I think the reason is probably that we might come from a small country, but we have a long border with Russia, over 800 miles. And we, of course, have our own historical experience with Russia from World War II, the Winter War and the War of Continuation. And if I look at the silver lining of where we stand right now, we found a solution in 1944, and I'm sure that we'll be able to find a solution in 2025 to end Russia's war of aggression and find and get a lasting and just peace. The situation is very difficult, but that's why we're here.
Thank you, Alex, very much. Good job. So we're going to be meeting for a while, and we're going to discuss some of the issues. And I don't think there's any issue that's overly complex. It's at a point now where people want to do things. I really do believe. I've known him for a long time. I've always had a great relationship with him. I think that President Putin wants to find an answer too. And we'll see. And in a certain period of time, not very far from now, a week or 2 weeks, we're going to know whether or not we're going to solve this, or is this horrible fighting going to continue. We'll do our best to get it ended. And I believe you have 2 willing parties, and usually that's good news, but 2 willing parties that want to make a deal. And we'll journey together, and we'll go over, and we'll see if it can be done. And it's possible it might not be able to be done. On the other hand, it's possible it will, and we're going to save thousands and thousands of lives a week. And so it's something we really have to do. And, or at least we have to give it our best. It's all you can do. You can give it your best. But I think we may have a very good outcome. So I want to thank you all, and the media, I want to thank you. We're going to be staying here for a little while. Then we're going to walk over to the Oval Office, and we're going to have another little discussion about similar matters. And then they're going to go home to their great countries and report. And I'm going to remain here and work, and you're going to go and work. We're all going to be working. We may be in a different location, but that's what we know how to do, is work. But I want to thank the media. Has been actually very fair, generally speaking, very fair. I think it's important that they're fair, because this is a very important subject. We have to get it ended. And so that's all we ask for, is fairness with the media. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
We've been listening into the East Room meeting there of the European leaders along with NATO and President Trump and President Zelenskyy, a critical meeting in the potential march towards peace in the country of Ukraine in that violent, bloody war against Russia. We've learned a lot in this meeting, both the European leaders and President Trump and President Zelenskyy talking about what is on the table in this potential plan. What we've learned is the meeting right now is to discuss security guarantees, which countries essentially will provide troops potentially, including the United States. The president was asked twice today about that. He didn't commit either way. We know that France and the UK have committed to that. And also the bringing back of Ukrainians that are either prisoners of war, families, or children that have been taken by the Russians in this war to come back. We're talking about 1,000 to thousands of Ukrainians that are right now in Russian custody. President Zelenskyy talking about them being brought back as well. But there are still some points of contention. First, we don't know what's going to happen with the territory that Russia has taken after their invasion, number one. And number two, and maybe more importantly, what's going to happen with this ceasefire? Both the Chancellor of Germany and the President of France suggesting that a ceasefire is necessary before that next trilateral meeting, which President Zelenskyy says he is open to, and he wants President Trump to be there. President Trump said he would be there as well. But it looks like there might be a point of contention there. Peter Alexander is our chief White House correspondent. Of course, he joins me here in the North Lawn. Peter, we were listening in there. We learned a lot today. There are still some big outstanding points that we don't know. We know that the president said he's going to call Vladimir Putin after this meeting with the European leaders. But a lot we've learned, and we sort of know what's at stake now.
Well, the bottom line is it's clear that these conversations are productive. Volodymyr Zelenskyy, his first remarks were this has been a really good conversation. That in itself is a major difference from where we were at this time 6 months ago after that blow up inside the West Wing and the Oval Office between Presidents Zelenskyy and Trump. Significantly after that, we also heard from Zelenskyy, who appeared to express an openness to a conversation about territorial boundaries. So what, if any, boundaries will be changed as a function of this? On the topic of ceasefire, you and I, our eyebrows raised quickly as we saw some of the other leaders push the president on this idea of a ceasefire. The president has made clear he thinks they can go directly to a peace deal. You'll remember the president came into that meeting with Putin saying that, hey, we want to have a ceasefire by the end of this. More than 14 Ukrainians have died in the time since that. So is a ceasefire something that they're open to, or is there the ability to get to that peace deal soon enough? And then finally, I think something that's particularly striking, we should note it almost feels like they're serving for lunch praise and gratitude, right? A lot more thank yous to Donald Trump this go around here. But at the end of all of it, I think clearly it looks like the president has a very condensed timeline. He wants this to happen quickly. He mentioned the word trilat multiple times. His takeaway from his conversations with Vladimir Putin was basically that I believe he wants to get a deal, whether it's for me because of the personal relationship or to put this to an end. He seems to believe that Putin would be on board with some sort of an agreement. Is there a place where these two sides can meet?
I want to bring in the former U.S. ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul, who's always been such a key analyst for us on days like this. You've been in meetings like this, Ambassador. You've dealt with Russia and Putin directly. First, the president of Finland saying this is the most progress they've made in 3.5 years. Is that fair? It sounds like it is. And the other question for you is we're hearing from a lot of the European leaders security guarantees like Article 5 in the NATO treaty, which essentially says if you attack one of us, you attack all of us. Walk our viewers through what you just observed today.
I think this was a very positive meeting. And whoever had the idea to bring all these European leaders together, in addition to President Zelenskyy, that was a brilliant, brilliant idea. And having it come so quickly after Alaska was also very important because now they've changed the talking points here. Just in this meeting alone, they've walked back some of the positions that the president was echoing when he met with President Putin. So this is very positive progress. The fact that they're talking about a ceasefire again, Chancellor Merz brought it up in particular. There's no logic. I want to underscore this idea that a ceasefire gets in the way of negotiations, that is not historically true. And why should people continue to die while they're negotiating? So I'm glad that's back on the table. And second, the most important thing is that they're talking about security guarantees with European soldiers being a part of that. That is major progress with American assistance. I myself would like NATO guarantees rather than NATO-like guarantees. But if you have to compromise, I think this is an important compromise and a step forward.
Ambassador, I do want to ask you, we didn't hear a lot about the territory that Russia invaded and is still holding. That really hasn't been talked about all day. It might be one of the most contentious points, obviously. Why do you think no one has sort of touched that topic just yet? President Zelenskyy briefly mentioned it, but we still have no details about what exactly gets split up and if indeed there is a new Russia border.
So I think they're leaving that for the trilateral meeting, if I'm guessing. That's number one. Number two, Putin made a very maximalist position that he's put out there. He said that Ukraine has to give up territory in Donbass that Ukrainian soldiers currently hold and are held by Ukraine. That's nonsensical. That's a non-starter. And so I think the hope is that once they begin to talk, they'll get rid of that idea, but then talk seriously about some kind of there'll never be a swap for Ukraine. I want to underscore that. They'll never say this is part of Russia, but could they agree to unification only through peaceful means, which would be de facto, that would be Russian territory? That, I think, they're leaning towards, as long as Zelenskyy can get a serious security guarantee from the people in the room today at the White House.
Most of the world wants peace, especially the people of Ukraine. Do you see anything holding this up or that could derail the entire process?
Yeah, one guy, Vladimir Putin. Just because they've all agreed that there should be security guarantees and peace does not mean that he will agree to it. And I want to emphasize this is a positive development compared to where we were just on Friday in that Alaska meeting, and that they're changing the terms of things that are being discussed. But if Putin doesn't want to go along, he thinks time is on his side, and he'll just continue to go back to the war.
Ambassador McFaul, we thank you for your time. I want to get to Kristen Welker, the moderator of Meet the Press. Kristen, quite the scene there in the East Room, right? You had the president flanked by major leaders of Europe and the EU and NATO, and nearly all of them, likely all of them, praising the president for sort of opening this path, opening this doorway towards peace. But some of them challenging the president as well, saying they should have a ceasefire before they get to this trilateral meeting.
Well, Tom, that's right. First of all, to the fact that you have all of these European leaders gathered in the East Room of the White House, it's just an extraordinary scene, and it underscores the fact that for these leaders, they see Ukraine's security as being essential to their security. When I have had the opportunity to interview President Zelenskyy, one of the big arguments he makes, Tom, is that this is not just about Ukraine. He believes that President Putin is eyeing going into other countries. So he believes that stopping him in Ukraine is a part of protecting the broader security of Europe. And then to your point about a ceasefire, I have to tell you, in talking to Ukrainian and European officials ahead of this meeting, they all signaled this was going to be a key focus, that they were going to raise this issue again because they see it as fundamental. Why should Vladimir Putin be able to continue the killing, they say, while they're having these discussions? They say it's not conducive to productive talk. So, Tom, for as forceful as some of those leaders were in those public remarks, you can anticipate they'll be even stronger privately.
Kristen, welcome for us. Always great to have you on this coverage. Kristen, we thank you. I want to get to Richard Engel, who's live for us tonight in Ukraine. Richard, you covered so many wars and conflicts. When we talk about a peacekeeping force, once that's decided, and we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but this is going to take time. It's going to take time to figure out who the troops are, where they're stationed, how do they get there, and then explain to our viewers sort of this Article 5 guarantee, which means that these troops would have to defend Ukraine.
Yes and no. They wouldn't necessarily be armed troops there prepared to battle against Russian forces. They could be peacekeepers. A lot can be done now with technology. A lot can be done with drones and satellite images. There are mechanisms that can be put in place that don't necessarily immediately involve American or French or Finnish troops fighting against the Russians. Article 5 is interesting. They keep talking about it, an Article 5-like agreement, meaning that if Russia were to attack Ukraine again after these security guarantees are put in place at the end of a conflict or with the start of a ceasefire, then if Russia attacked it would be as if it was attacking all the parties that agreed to the agreements, attacking the United States, attacking Europe, and there would be some sort of response. But you don't necessarily need American troops patrolling up and down the border physically to be there. You'd have some sort of presence, but it wouldn't have to be American Marines or soldiers.
And then, Richard, as far as the people of Ukraine hearing this meeting, President Zelenskyy seemed very positive with the president, thankful. It sounded like President Zelenskyy felt in his heart they were getting close to an agreement.
Well, because as you mentioned earlier, this is, to a degree, the easier part. This is what Ukrainians have been asking for. President Zelenskyy says that he wants a meeting with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. He wants security guarantees. He said he wants NATO membership, but a NATO-like agreement, something like Article 5, is probably something he could accept. But for the Ukrainians living here, the most sensitive conversation is going to be, what is the price tag? Are they going to have to give up 20% of the country and all the people who live there in exchange for these security agreements? Or will there be pressure put on Vladimir Putin to compromise? Why does Ukraine have to make all of the sacrifices when it was Russia that invaded this country? I think that's the way people here see it.
Speaking of Russia, I want to get over to Keir Simmons, who joins us live from London tonight. Keir, you've interviewed Vladimir Putin. You cover Russia for us here at NBC News. How is Putin going to take in this sort of meeting, right? All these European leaders, members of NATO, the EU here, sort of celebrating the moment, the path possibly towards peace, and praising Donald Trump in many ways. And President Zelenskyy sitting there at the table as well.
President Putin on Friday, Tom, said something, almost a throwaway line, but it was really notable, I thought. He said, we've got something of the opening of a deal, a quote, unless the Europeans derail it. And the question now, I think, is whether President Putin is watching from the Kremlin, watching that bonhomie around that table, a scene of friendship, of collaboration, whether he is watching that not with the kind of positivity that you felt from that room, but with a sense of, there we go, there's the Europeans getting in the way of what I thought I'd agreed with the American president just days ago. And one of those questions is going to be about what territory he wants and what territory he's prepared to not have.
You think Putin, who's obviously very calculated, will follow President Trump's timeline and this trilateral happens sooner than later?
Good question. I think if, as the German Chancellor suggested, a ceasefire is demanded, that might, from his point of view, Putin's point of view, give him an exit ramp to not have that trilateral. But so much is unexpected right now, Tom.
All right, Keir, we appreciate that. That concludes this NBC News special report. We're going to have much more on our streaming network, NBC News Now, online at NBCNews.com. And I'll see you back here for a special edition of Nightly News. I'm Tom Yamas. We thank you for watching.
Bottom of the hour now, and here's some of the stories making headlines on NBC News Daily. Seattle's unveiling an 8-foot, 650-pound statue to honor WNBA star Sue Bird. You'll remember Bird won 4 WNBA championships during her 21 seasons while playing for the Seattle Storm before retiring back in 2023. She says she chose the layup position for the statue because that's what earned her her very first and last points of her